The leather seat felt colder than I expected when I leaned back. Not painfully cold, just enough to notice. I was sitting in the back of my father's car, parked along the curb outside a restaurant in downtown Chicago, the kind with soft lighting and no prices on the menu. The engine was off. The street was quiet except for the low murmur of valet attendants and the occasional laugh drifting out through the doors. 20 minutes earlier, I had been walking toward those same doors with my family. Then my father stopped. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He leaned in close, his hand firm around my forearm, and said, "Stay in the car. We can't afford any distractions tonight." That was it. No explanation, no discussion. Just a calm instruction, delivered the same way he used to correct waiters or junior partners. Controlled. Final. I nodded once and stepped back without arguing. Silence had always worked better for me than protest. From the tinted window, I watched my parents and siblings disappear inside. The glass reflected my own face faintly, neutral, composed, nothing dramatic. I smoothed the sleeve of my dress and let the moment pass. The restaurant's entrance glowed warm against the evening air. Guests arrived in tailored coats and polished shoes, their conversations low and confident. I recognized a few faces: investors, executives, people my family had been trying to impress for months. I checked my phone. A message from my younger sister came through almost immediately. "What are you doing? The Caldwell Group is here. Dad is already tense." I didn't respond. Another message followed. "This isn't about you. Please don't make this harder." I turned the phone face down on the seat beside me. The truth was, I understood exactly why they'd asked me to stay behind. I'd walked away from the family firm years earlier. Quietly. Without drama. I hadn't argued or demanded anything. I'd simply said I needed to do things differently. They called it a phase, a detour, something I'd outgrow. I rested my head lightly against the window and watched the reflection of the restaurant doors open and close. The smell of polished leather and faint cologne lingered in the car. Somewhere inside, my father was talking about legacy, about stability, about trust built over generations. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't family. It was a short message from my assistant. "Documents are finalized. Board call in 30 minutes. Are you close?" I looked at the restaurant entrance again. The timing felt precise. Almost too precise. I didn't reply right away. I adjusted the strap of my bag, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, and took one slow breath. My father used to say timing was everything in business. He said it so often it became background noise. I picked up my phone, typed a brief response, and locked the screen. Then I waited. For a moment. I stayed in the car longer than I needed to. Not out of hesitation, out of habit. Waiting had always been my way of creating space. Space to think. Space to decide what mattered and what didn't. The city lights reflected off the windshield as another group of guests passed by, their voices muffled, their laughter brief and contained. 5 years earlier, I had walked away from my family's investment firm with the same quiet certainty. No arguments, no dramatic exits. Just a signed resignation letter and a box of personal items I carried out myself. At the time, my father didn't stop me. He stood in his office doorway, arms folded, and said, "You'll be back. Everyone comes back." I hadn't corrected him. The firm had been his life's work, built on careful risk, conservative strategies, and relationships that went back decades. Dinner conversations growing up were always about markets, clients, and long-term positioning. My siblings absorbed it naturally. They knew the language. They knew the rules. I asked different questions. What happens when the systems change? What happens when speed matters more than tradition? Those questions were usually met with polite smiles and gentle redirection. Later, my father would say, "When you have more experience." Eventually, I realized later meant never. So I left. I didn't leave with much. My trust fund was modest compared to my siblings. Enough to start, not enough to coast. I treated it like seed capital, not a safety net. I invested quietly, carefully. I avoided my last name and built everything behind holding companies and layered accounts. No press, no announcements, just process. Inside the restaurant, the meeting was already underway. I could picture it easily. My father seated at the center of the table, posture relaxed, voice measured. My brother nodding at the right moments. My sister managing impressions, scanning reactions. They were good at that part. What they didn't see was how much the ground beneath them had shifted. I glanced at my phone again. No new messages from family. Another update from my assistant appeared instead. Confirmation numbers, timestamps, a reminder of the upcoming call. Everything was aligned. I stepped out of the car then, the evening air cooler than I expected. The sound of traffic felt distant, softened by the city's rhythm. I straightened my jacket and walked toward the entrance without rushing. The maitre d' recognized me immediately. "Good evening," he said, already reaching for menus. "Your usual—" "Not tonight," I replied gently. "My family is dining with guests." There was a brief pause, a recalibration. "Of course," he said, gesturing toward the private dining area. "Right this way." As we walked, I could hear my father's voice through the partially closed door ahead. Calm, confident, explaining history, explaining value, explaining why stability mattered. I stopped just outside the room. I could have waited longer. I could have stayed invisible. Instead, I placed my hand on the door handle and let it rest there for a second. Long enough to feel the weight of the moment. Long enough to decide that silence had done its work. Then I opened the door and stepped inside. The room went still. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Glasses hovered above the table. My brother's expression shifted first, then my sister's. My mother's smile held for half a second too long before faltering. Across the table, one of the guests stood. He looked at me, then back at my father, then returned his attention to me with a quiet, unmistakable recognition. "Good evening," he said, inclining his head slightly. That was when I knew the room was about to change. I took my seat calmly and set my bag beside the chair. Then I waited. No one spoke right away. My father was still standing, his hand resting on the back of his chair, expression unreadable. My brother stared at the table. My sister looked between us, searching for an explanation that hadn't been offered. The guest who had greeted me remained on his feet for a moment longer than necessary. Then he pulled out his chair slowly and sat back down, eyes never leaving me. "I didn't realize this was a family dinner," he said lightly. "It is," my father replied, voice steady but tight. "And this is my daughter." He looked at me then, not with anger, but with confusion. "What are you doing here?" I folded my hands in my lap. "Joining you," I said, "if that's still all right." A brief silence followed, the kind people mistake for hesitation when it's really recalculation. The guest cleared his throat. "For clarity," he said, turning slightly toward my father, "we've already been working together for some time." My brother looked up sharply. "Working together how?" The guest didn't answer him. He reached into his briefcase and placed a slim folder on the table instead. He slid it toward the center, stopping just short of my father's wine glass. "These are the finalized documents," he said. "Pending signatures." My father glanced down at the folder but didn't open it. "I don't recall agreeing to anything final." "You didn't," the guest replied evenly. "Your firm advised. The transaction itself was handled elsewhere." I reached into my bag and removed a second folder, identical in size and color. I placed it gently beside the first. "Same documents," I said, "different copy." My sister's chair shifted slightly. "What is this?" "Process," I replied, "the part that happens quietly." My father finally opened the folder. He didn't rush. He read the first page carefully, then the second, His brow furrowed, not in anger, but in recognition. He knew paperwork. He knew structure. He stopped at a familiar name. Not my family's. Mine. Or rather, the one I used. He looked up slowly. "This holding company," he said. "It's been involved in multiple acquisitions we lost bids on." "Yes," I said. "You weren't losing. You just weren't included." My brother let out a short breath. "You're saying—" "I'm saying," I interrupted gently, "that the advisory role tonight is symbolic. The ownership isn't." The guest nodded once, confirming without embellishment. My mother finally spoke. "Since when?" I considered the question carefully. Long enough for it to be stable. No one argued with that. Stability was a language my family understood. My father closed the folder and rested his palm flat against it. His hand wasn't shaking, but it wasn't relaxed either. "So this dinner," he said quietly, "was never about convincing them." "No," I replied. "It was about closure." The words settled differently than accusation would have. I checked my watch. "There's a board call in 15 minutes, I added. "I can take it from here, or we can finish dinner first." That was the moment things shifted. Not emotionally, but structurally. The realization that the sequence had already played out, that decisions had been made elsewhere, earlier, without noise. The guest leaned back in his chair. "We'll follow your lead," he said to me. My father didn't object. He just nodded once, slowly, as if acknowledging a fact he could no longer edit. I placed both folders neatly together and stood. "I'll step out to take the call," I said. "No need to rush." As I walked toward the door, no one stopped me. Behind me, the room remained quiet. And for the first time that evening, the silence felt intentional. The hallway outside the dining room was softly lit, muted carpet underfoot, the kind of space designed to absorb sound and emotion. I walked a few steps away, then stopped near a tall window overlooking the street. Cars moved steadily below. Everything else felt suspended. I took the call without sitting down. The board members were already connected. Familiar voices, controlled pacing, no small talk. I listened first. That part mattered. They reviewed confirmations, timestamps, and vote counts. Each item followed the same pattern. Clear, documented, settled. When they finished, there was a pause. They were waiting for direction, not approval. I spoke briefly. Step 1, confirm execution. Step 2, notify regulators in the morning window. Step 3, internal communication held until markets close the next day. No one questioned the sequence. When the call ended, I didn't move right away. I let the phone rest in my hand until the screen dimmed, then placed it face down on the narrow console table beneath the window. Inside the dining room, I could hear voices again. Lower now. Uneven. The sound of glasses being set down more carefully than before. I re-entered without announcing myself. Everyone looked up. My father was seated now, posture less formal, jacket unbuttoned. My brother leaned forward, elbows near the edge of the table, trying to understand a system he hadn't realized he was inside. My sister sat very still, hands folded, eyes tracking everything. I took my seat again. "No one's being replaced tonight," I said calmly. "That's not how this works." My brother exhaled, relieved too quickly. "Then what is happening?" "Alignment," I replied. "Or separation. That part is optional." My father studied me. "You planned this." "I planned for outcomes," I said, "not reactions." The guest cleared his throat. "For context," he added, "the transition structure has been in motion for months. Advisory overlap, operational reviews, quiet integration." My mother shook her head slightly. "Why not tell us?" I didn't answer right away. When I did, my voice stayed even. Because this only works if it's based on capability, not permission. No one argued with that either. I reached into my bag and removed a thin tablet, placing it flat on the table. One tap brought up a clean interface. Timelines, performance graphs, comparative models. Not flashy, functional. This is where things stand, I said. Current metrics, forecasts, areas of risk. I slid the tablet toward my father. He didn't touch it immediately. Then he did, slowly. He scrolled, stopped, read, and scrolled again. The room stayed quiet while he absorbed the information. These numbers, he said finally. They're accurate. Yes. And they've been verified independently. Yes. He nodded once. Not agreement, acceptance. My sister leaned closer. What happens to the firm? That depends, I said, on whether it wants to keep doing what it's always done. My brother's jaw tightened. And if we don't? Then nothing changes, I replied, except the timeline. That landed heavier than any threat would have.
The guest glanced at his watch.
I'll give you a few minutes, he said, standing. I'll be nearby. After he left, the room felt smaller. My father closed the tablet and rested his hands on the table. If we move forward, he said, this won't be symbolic. No, I agreed. It will be operational. Another pause, longer this time. Outside, a server refilled water glasses no one was drinking from. I waited. Decisions made under pressure rarely hold. I had learned that early. Eventually, my father spoke again. We need to talk tomorrow. Privately. I nodded. Tomorrow works. That was enough for the night. Dinner resumed in fragments, half-finished plates, polite conversation that didn't try to recover what had already passed. When we stood to leave, no one asked me to wait behind. Outside, the air felt cooler than before. I walked alone to the curb and stood there for a moment, watching reflections ripple across the restaurant's glass front. Then I stepped into the car, and this time, I didn't sit in the back. The meeting the next morning took place in my office, not the family firm's boardroom, not my father's corner suite with the heavy desk and framed legacy photos. This space was quieter. Glass walls, neutral colors, no trophies, just screens, documents, and a long table designed for work, not ceremony. My father arrived first. He stood for a moment after the door closed, looking around without speaking. His coat was neatly folded over his arm. He didn't sit until I gestured to the chair across from me. We didn't exchange pleasantries. You put us in a difficult position, he said finally. I gave you clarity, I replied. The position was already difficult. He nodded slightly. Fair. A moment later, my brother and sister joined us. Both looked tired. Not defeated, just alert in a way that comes from realizing the rules have shifted. I opened a folder and placed it at the center of the table. Not thick, just enough pages to matter. This isn't a takeover, I said. It's a framework. I slid the first page forward. Roles, reporting lines, oversight boundaries. No titles change today, I continued. Authority does, gradually, with review points. My brother leaned in. And you? I'm accountable, I said, to performance, same as everyone else. My sister studied the numbers. These systems, she said, tapping the page lightly. They replace half our processes. They replace delay, I replied. The work still needs people who understand judgment. My father listened without interrupting. When I finished, he folded his hands and looked at me directly. You don't sound angry, he said. I'm not. That surprises me. It shouldn't, I said. Anger is inefficient. That earned a brief, reluctant smile. Then it faded. This changes the family, he said. Yes, I agreed. But it doesn't erase it. Silence settled. Not tense, deliberate. Finally, My father reached for the pen resting beside the folder. He didn't sign immediately. He turned it once in his fingers, then set it down again. "One condition," he said. I waited. "No assumptions," he continued. "If this works, it works because it's right, not because you're my daughter." I nodded. That was already a requirement. He picked up the pen and signed. My sister followed after a pause, then my brother, slower than the rest. When it was done, no one spoke for a few seconds. Papers lay flat on the table. The room felt settled, not resolved, but aligned. I gathered the documents and placed them back into the folder. "We'll start with operations," I said. "Training schedules go out this afternoon." My father stood, smoothing his jacket. "Dinner tonight?" he asked cautiously. "Another time," I replied. "Let's get through today first." He accepted that. After they left, I remained seated for a moment longer. I straightened the stack of unused paper, closed the folder, and placed it in the cabinet behind me. Then I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window. Below, the city moved on as it always had. I watched it quietly. Then I got back to work. By the end of that week, the new systems were live. No announcement, no internal memo, just a quiet transition from old procedures to automated ones. Reports that used to take days began generating in minutes. Decision chains shortened. Patterns appeared where confusion once lived. I kept my office door open more often. People adjusted faster than expected once they realized efficiency wasn't a threat. The first performance review under the new model arrived exactly 30 days later. I printed one copy, on purpose, and placed it in front of my father during our scheduled meeting. He read it silently. The numbers told the story without any help from me. Client retention up 20%. Operational costs down 12%. Market response positive and steady. He looked up when he finished. "You were right about the systems," he said quietly. "About the mindset," I corrected. "Systems only reflect what we decide to see." He nodded. "And about that, your brother and sister have been learning." "I know," I said. "They've been consistent." He gave a small, genuine smile. "I didn't expect them to adapt this quickly." "They had a reason to," I replied. "They saw results." We didn't linger on sentiment. It wasn't our way. But for the first time, there was no underlying tension in the silence that followed. Just calm acknowledgement. Later that day, my sister stopped by my office holding a data tablet. "You have a minute?" she asked. I nodded. She pulled up a series of charts. "These projections, if we apply your predictive model to our smaller accounts, we could triple their yield within 2 quarters." She said "our" without noticing. I smiled slightly. "Run it. Let's see what happens." When she left, I watched the door close gently behind her. Progress rarely announces itself loudly. By evening, I was the last one still in the office. The city outside was bathed in that soft golden light that only happens just before dusk. I turned off the screens one by one until the rooms settled into stillness. The folder from the dinner meeting, now signed and complete, sat neatly in the cabinet. I opened it once more, not to reread, but to confirm that everything had finally found its place. The family business hadn't been destroyed. It had evolved. Slowly, functionally, without spectacle. That was the outcome I'd wanted all along. Before leaving, I wrote one note on the inside cover of the folder. Change works best when no one realizes it's already happened. Then I closed the cabinet, turned off the lights, and walked out. 6 months later, my routine looked very ordinary. I arrived early. I made tea instead of coffee most mornings. I reviewed reports quietly before anyone else came in. The office no longer felt like a proving ground. It felt like a system that worked. The firm had stabilized, then grown. My brother now ran model reviews twice a week. He asked questions before making decisions. He listened more than he spoke. My sister oversaw client transitions, translating new technology into language people trusted. She was good at it, better than I expected. My father stopped coming in every day. When he did, he stayed for an hour or two, advisory only. He'd sit across from me, review summaries, and tell short stories about mistakes he'd made decades ago, things he never admitted before. When he left, he always straightened the chair. At home, life was quieter.
I cooked more, cleaned as I went, took evening walks without my phone.
One night, I reorganized a single drawer that had bothered me for years and felt oddly satisfied when it finally closed smoothly. Family dinner resumed eventually, not at expensive restaurants. At my place. Simple food, no seating order, no business talk unless someone asked for it. The first time, there were pauses. Old habits die slowly. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was just space. One evening after they left, I rinsed the last plate and set it on the drying rack. I stood there for a moment, listening to the apartment settle. Pipes ticking, distant traffic, normal sounds. That was when I realized something had fully ended. Not the conflict, the waiting. A few weeks later, I got a message from someone I barely knew, a former colleague, pushed aside, overlooked, asked to wait while others made decisions for them. They didn't ask for revenge, they asked for clarity. I told them the same thing I'd learned the hard way. Build quietly, document everything, and let process speak before emotion ever does. Some stories don't end with confrontation. They end with order. If you stayed with me through this, thank you. If this story felt familiar in any way, you're not alone. Before you go, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy calm, real-life stories like this one. Let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I always enjoy reading those. 2 more stories will appear next. Ones that follow a similar path, just in very different places. Until then, take care of your space, your time, and your quiet confidence.